Good morning, students. Welcome you all on the third lecture of Ind AS 116. Students, so far we have covered the concept of Ind AS 116 from the lessee perspective, although we have not completed, but we have covered a majority of the bit of the lessee accounting. And students, we have started with the difference between, what is in India as of now, like AS 19, what was there globally, IFRS 16, and what is in terms of Ind AS, it is Ind AS 116. So we have covered all these aspects. Then in detail, we have discussed the meaning of identified asset, the meaning of right to control the use of an asset, transfer of right to control the use of an asset. Then what is meant by lease term and what is meant by lease payments, right? So we have also covered in detail the meaning of this lease contract under Ind AS 116, correct? So we have covered this explicit and implicit, and the supplier has a substantive right to substitute the asset. In that case, it will not be considered as identified asset. So we have done few illustrations also on every concepts. We have also covered right to control the use of an asset, where the substantially all the economic benefit from using the asset should lie with the lessee, and the lessee has the right to take a decision for what purpose the asset is going to be used and how the asset is going to be used. So these are the things which we have covered so far. Correct. Then friends, we did so many questions on this aspect as well. Then we discussed the concept of inception date of the lease. Inception date of the lease is the date on which the principal terms and conditions are agreed or agreements have been entered. Then commencement date of the lease is the date when the physical possession or the transfer of the asset has happened. And friends, commencement date of the lease is an important date on which the accounting is going to be started, right? On which you are required to compute right of use asset and lease liability, and you are required to recognize that. Then we covered lease term. Lease term is equal to non-cancelable period plus rent-free period plus optional renewal period if lessee is reasonably certain to exercise that, okay, option, plus optional termination period if lessee is reasonably certain to not to exercise the optional termination period, right? Friends, in that case, we have also discussed in case of a termination clause, if both the parties have a right to terminate, then the optional termination period is not required to be considered for the purpose of computation of lease term. But if only the lessee has the option, in that case, you need to see the reasonable certainty to not to exercise the termination option. If only the lessor has the termination option, in that case, my dear friends, you are not required to check anything. Why? Because the lessee does not have any termination option. The full lease term will be the lease term. Okay, the full lease term will be the lease term. Friends, then we discussed the reassessment of lease term, and we understood if there was an option which was taken earlier, but subsequently, due to the change in circumstances, it is visible that this option is not going to be taken, right? Not going to be exercised. And the typical example in case of COVID, right? The companies which are considering that we will consider the optional renewal period, or we will not consider the optional termination period. I mean to say, not exercise the optional termination option. Friends, all these assumptions have been changed in case of COVID. The companies which are thinking about, renewing the optional renewal period, they have stopped till the time of expiry of the original period. Why? Either because they have allowed their people to work from home, or due to the lot of availability of the spaces, right? They got the space at the cheaper rate, and hence they are not willing to renew the lease contract from the same lessor, right? So these are the aspects where you need to reassess, revise your lease term. We did 2-3 questions on this aspect as well. In the last class, we discussed the future lease payments, and friends, we discussed there are 5 lease payments from the perspective of the lessee, and there are 6 lease payments from the perspective of the lessor, right? So what is meant by lease payments from the perspective of lessee? So whenever you have to do the accounting, you need to know about the lease payments also. Lease payment includes fixed lease payment. plus in substance fixed lease payment, right? Fixed lease payment, for example, 10,000 is the lease rental for the 5-year period with an escalation clause of 10% every year. Sitting today, I know my escalation amount every year. I know what is my rent in the 5th year, 4th year, 3rd year, 2nd year, and today. Okay. So friends, the escalation is in substance fixed. Okay. And my fixed payment is, of course, from which I have started paying my rental. Plus variable lease payment, not depending on the performance, not depending on the output, not depending on the sales. Okay. Variable lease payment, which is depending on an index or a rate, right? Which index or a rate? On the measurement date. On the measurement date. होलसेल प्राइस इंडेक्स ऑफ इंडिया कब का? आज का. आज का मतलब मेजरमेंट डेट का, ना कि 5 साल बाद का, राइट सर? But it keeps on changing. So for example, in the next year, and my escalation is on the basis of, let's say, variable index rate, so my outflow will change. Friends, whenever my cash flow will change, I have to reset, I have to revise my escalation on the basis of revised index or a rate, right? But not today. Exercise price plus exercise price. If in the lease contract there is an option to purchase, right? In that case, if the exercise price is there, that has to be taken into consideration. Plus penalties for terminating the lease, that is also required to be taken into consideration. If lessee is reasonably certain that lessee is going to avail the termination option and it will lead to a penalty, it is going to be taken. Okay. Residual value guarantee by the lessee. If lessee has given any guarantee of residual value to the lessor, that residual value guarantee is also required to be taken into consideration in case of a lease payment. Always remember, this exercise price, penalties, residual value, this will come at the end of the lease period. Okay. Because exercise price will come when you exercise. Okay. Typically at the end of the lease period. Friends, these all 5 payments are the lease payment from the perspective of the lessor as well. Plus, since the asset belongs to the lessor, so if anyone other than the lessee has also given a guarantee, residual value guarantee to the lessor, that residual value guarantee is also required to be taken into consideration, right? Then we did some questions on this aspect. Then we discussed interest rate. The question is, sir, if we need to compute the present value, then what is the discount rate? Discount rate is the interest rate. What is the interest rate? There are 2 interest rates. In number 1, always you need to consider interest rate implicit in the lease. What is interest rate implicit in the lease? It's a lessor what? Lessor IRR, lessor internal rate of return. Lessor internal rate of return. Sir, if lessor internal rate of return is not known, then you need to consider incremental borrowing rate of the lessee. Generally, how will you come to know that what your lessor is earning? आपको कैसे पता चलेगा कि lessor क्या कमा रहा है? No one will tell you that, okay, I am earning 10%, I am earning 15%. No one will tell you. So generally the companies are applying lessee's incremental borrowing rate. Okay. So the first option is lessor IRR. The second option is lessee's IBR. But you need to solve the question. Friends, if in the question both the interest rate is given, in that case you need to consider the lessor IRR. And I have done this question on the Excel file as well. Okay. I have done this question on the Excel file as well. Then we discussed initial direct cost. Initial direct cost are those costs, right, which is directly related to the entering into a lease contract. Initial direct cost means cost, incremental cost of obtaining a lease that would have been avoided if the lease contract would not have been entered. Okay. For example, your brokerage, stamp duty, okay, legal fees. So these are the initial direct cost. Payment to existing tenant to move out. These are the incremental direct costs, initial direct costs. Then friends, we discussed the initial recognition and measurement. Initially, right of use asset is required to be recognized in the books of accounts and lease liability is required to be credited in the books of accounts on the commencement date. What is my right of use asset? My right of use asset is equal to present value of the future lease payment. Present value of the future lease payments. Okay. Means मेरी जो भी लीज लाइबिलिटी है उसका मैं प्रेजेंट वैल्यू निकालूंगा तो वो क्या होगा, वो मेरा राइट ऑफ यूज एसेट होगा. दैट इज माई राइट ऑफ यूज एसेट. सर, इफ आई हैव पेड, सो आई अंडरस्टैंड फ्यूचर लीज पेमेंट की प्रेजेंट वैल्यू निकालूंगा. अगर मैंने कोई एडवांस में पेमेंट कर दी तो प्लस एडवांस पेमेंट एज वेल, मीन्स अमाउंट पेड ऑन और बिफोर द कमेंसमेंट डेट, right? If we have paid anything on or before the commencement date, that is also required to be added to the right of use assets, right? Plus, if I have incurred some initial direct cost, that is also required to be added to the right of use asset. Plus, if I have entered into a lease and there is a liability associated with lease in terms of provision for dismantling or site restoration cost, if there is a liability associated with that lease also, so that provision at present value is also required to be added to the cost of ROU asset, and credit is provision for dismantling obligation as per Ind AS 37. Okay, this is what we have discussed, right? Friends, this part, right of use asset, right? In our accounting standard or old accounting, it was very simple. Rent account debit to bank account, rent account debit to lessor account, lessor to bank. But in Ind AS 116, it is very complex, right? You have to discount your all the future lease payment, take it to the present value, then you need to debit right of use asset, credit lease liability, you need to depreciate right of use asset, you need to also charge interest on lease liability, then you pay. Okay, so it's a complex kind of a accounting treatment in comparison to our old accounting standard, right? Or previous standard on leases. Is there any exemption from this accounting? Standard says yes, there is an exemption with this accounting. What is the exemption? Standard says that there are two kind of exemption: short-term lease exemption and low-value leases exemption. Short-term lease exemption and low-value leases exemption, right? Friends, now I'm going to start the today's agenda. So far, in the last 10-15 minutes, I have revised what we have covered in the last two classes and largely what we have covered in the last class, right? Shall I move forward with the today's agenda? Yes? Okay, very good. So once again, a warm welcome and a very great morning to Anila, Anu, Tushar, Hemant, Niranjan, Nisha, Ginny, Pooja, Poonam, Stephen, Vignesh. So good morning, everyone, and people who have joined in on the portal. Good morning, Rahul, Radhika. Yes. Okay. Now, what is the exemption, friends? There are two exemptions: short-term lease exemption and low-value leases exemption. Short-term leases exemption and low-value leases exemption, right?
Sir, sorry to disturb, sir. I just had a query. I think you have not received. Even the amount deposit we give, we have to add for that total amount, sir.
Amount
Advance
recorded.
rent we will add. A deposit we will give, no, before rent. Is that also to be added there?
Anila, typically what happened, if the security deposit is refundable, right, it will not form part of your right of use asset. Why? Because let's say you have taken a premises on a lease basis for 5 years, right? What happened? You will pay rental for the 5 years. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So whatever is the future rentals, I mean to say rental for the 5-year period. So this 5-year period rental needs to be discounted at a present value, and for that ROU asset needs to be created. Correct? What is this ROU asset? This ROU asset is a notional asset. Am I right? It's a
Yes,
notional
sir.
asset. This notional asset is going to be depreciated over a period of 5 years.
Yes, sir.
Correct? So if you will add security deposit which is refundable, and your security deposit which you have taken is your liability, Correct? What accounting entry you will pass? Bank account debit to security deposit refundable account, right? Or to lessee account. Correct? This is the accounting entry you need to pass from the lessor perspective. And so from the lessor perspective, it is a liability. From the lessee perspective, it is an asset, right? The lessee has paid the security deposit. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So now
Understood, sir.
after 5 years, lessee has to get back the security deposits.
Yeah, we need to have that credit so that I will receive that and adjust.
So
Understood.
if you will add the security deposit to your ROU asset, then it will be depreciated over a period of 5 years, right? So at the end of 5 years, the lessee does not have any asset, okay, to be refundable in the books of accounts, right? So after 5 years, when the lessee will get the refund of security deposit, lessee will do bank account debit. But what he will credit?
Yes, sir. Understood, sir.
Right? So if the security deposit, which is refundable in nature, generally which is, so those security deposit has to be separately, okay, accounted for in the books of accounts. It will not form part of a right of use asset. But if it is a prepaid rent, advance rent, of course, this is a part of your lease payments. Instead of future, something has been paid in advance. So impact क्या आएगा? The impact is on the time value of money, since you have paid in advance or you have paid on the date of the commencement date. So your discount factor will always be 1, correct? आपका टाइम वैल्यू ऑफ मनी के हिसाब से 1 का डिस्काउंट फैक्टर होगा, राइट? Okay, shall I move forward? Yeah, friends, with this complex accounting, standard has given you 2 exemption. Exemption number 1, short-term lease exemption. Exemption number 2, low-value leases exemption. Okay. So what is short-term lease exemption? A lessee can opt for exemption from all the above treatment for a class of underlying asset to which the right of use asset belongs and recognize the lease payment on SLM basis over the period of use or other systematic basis. What is meant by short-term lease exemption? Can anyone tell me what is the meaning of short-term lease exemption?
Less than a year, sir.
Sorry.
Leases which are taken less than a year.
Leases which has been taken for less than a year. Okay. If the lease has to be taken for 12 months, for 1 year, whether it is a short-term lease or it is not a short-term lease?
Probably short-term lease, sir.
Probably short-term lease. Okay. Okay. Let's go to the short-term lease exemption. So it says that a lease term of 12 months or less. A lease term of 12 months or less. If there's a lease agreement of 12 months, it will also be considered as a short-term lease. Okay. It will also be considered as a short-term lease. So lease term of 12 months or less. What is a short-term lease? Let's say the lessee has taken 5 buildings on a lease basis. There are 3 buildings for which the lessee has done the lease contract for a year, for 12 months, for 3 buildings. For 2 buildings, the lease contract is for a longer period, let's say 5 years. Okay. So these are the 5 buildings and these are the single class of assets. Building is a single class of asset now. You all understand building is a single class of asset? In PP, we have understood the meaning of class of asset.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Class of asset means the same nature and uses in an entity's operation. So these all are office building. Office building and factory building are 2 different class of asset. So there are 5 office building. Okay. And all these office building, the lessee has taken on a lease basis, all these office building. 3 office building are on a 1-year lease and 2 office building is on a 5-year lease. My question to you guys is, can the lessee apply the right of use asset accounting for all these 5 leases? Hemant is saying no. What is others' view? There are 12 students who have joined on this Zoom link and 3 students who have joined on the portal, which I have seen as of now. What is your view?
Can you repeat the question again?
My question is, a lessee has taken five building on a lease basis, right? The lease period for 3 building is 1 year and the lease period for 2 building is for 5 years. All these are office building. My question is, can the lessee apply right of use asset accounting to all these 5 buildings?
So if, probably the contact will be for each individual asset, means that less 12 months asset, I don't need to capitalize ROU, sir, as per the short-term lease exemption.
Again, I'm repeating the question. Can the lessee apply ROU asset accounting for all these 5 leases? If the lessee will apply ROU asset accounting for all these 5 leases, will it be any non-compliance to Ind AS 116?
No, sir. It can apply, sir. He can apply.
He can apply. Very good. He can apply. Okay. So, friends, your basic accounting in Ind AS 116 is right of use asset accounting. Okay. Your fundamental accounting in Ind AS 116 is a right of use asset accounting. What is this short-term lease exemption and low value lease exemption? These are the exemption. These are the exemption. If the lessee wants to avail the exemption, he can avail the exemption, right? If the lessee wants to avail the exemption, a lessee can opt for the exemption. It is not mandate. It is an option. If you want to avail, very good. If you don't want to avail, very good. Right? While computing income from salaries, there is some standard deduction, some exemption, right? When you are paying a life insurance premium, you can take a deduction under section 80C. If you will not take a deduction, is there any non-compliance? You are paying higher tax. Non-compliance थोड़ी है, government का तो फायदा है. No one will come and tell you that, see, you have not taken any deduction, you have paid a higher taxes. Correct? My dear friends, the basic and fundamental accounting under Ind AS 116 for lessee is right of use asset accounting. Okay. If a lessee has taken a lease for a period of 1 year and lessee wants to apply right of use asset accounting, the lessee can do that. Lessee can do that. Okay. But why this exemption is given? This exemption is given that if the contract is for 1 year, then what is the purpose of applying this right of use asset accounting? Right? Because the time value of money is not material. Correct. And whatever interest and depreciation will be there, it is equivalent to your rental cost. Then why you are entering into such a big mess? So if it is a short-term lease, you can apply simple rent account debit to bank account, rent account debit to bank account, right? Friends, first of all, this is an exemption. This is an option, right? If you want to avail, very good. If you don't want to avail, very good. Okay. So what is a short-term lease? Short-term lease is a lease where the lease term is for 12 months or less. Okay. Whether you want to avail the short-term lease exemption, it has to be by the class of underlying asset. By the class of underlying asset. What does it mean? What does it mean by the class of underlying asset? का मतलब क्या होता है? So in my example, if there are 5 leases, okay. So let me take you on the Excel file. And let's cover here. Exemption from ROU asset accounting, right? There are 2 exemptions to this accounting. And these are the options. These are the optional exemption on the discretion of the lessee, right? It is not compulsion, it is the discretion. But let me tell you, every company is following this, okay? I hope my Excel file is visible to everyone, friends.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Option number 1, exemption 1, short-term leases. Short-term leases. Okay. So there are 5 buildings. Building 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Lease period. $12 months. Let's say 1 year. 1 year. Or let's say I put this as 11 months, 10 months. Five, 6. Okay. This is my lease period. And so building number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, lease period is 1 year, 11 months, 10 months, 5 years, 6 years. Okay. Question number 1. Question 1. Can a lessee apply the ROU accounting on all the above 5 buildings? What is your answer? Answer is yes.
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 Yes. Okay. Whether the short-term lease exemption is mandatory for building number 1, 2, and 3. करेक्ट? क्वेश्चन ठीक है ना? आपको आगे याद रहेगा ना इस क्वेश्चन को पढ़कर? यस, द लेसी कैन अप्लाई द ROU accounting for all of the above 5 buildings. Okay, all of the above 5 buildings. Okay, exemption is not mandatory. Question number 2. Okay, can the lessee apply ROU accounting for building 4 and 5 and avail short-term lease exemption for building 1, 2, and 3? What is your answer?
No.
Why no?
To such class of asset it should be applicable.
Consistency is required, sir.
First of all, tell me, in all these 5 buildings, which buildings are eligible for short-term lease exemption? Forget about class of asset.
1, 2, and
1,
3.
2, 3.
1, 2, and 3 is eligible for short-term lease exemption. Right? 4 and 5 is not eligible for short-term lease exemption. Okay, remove 4 and 5. Why? It is not eligible for short-term lease exemption. Every lease contract is a separate contract. There are 5 buildings. 2 buildings are not eligible for short-term lease exemption because there are the longer contract. Right? You cannot think about the exemption on the building number 4 and 5. You have building number 1, 2, and 3. And all these 3 buildings have 12 months or less lease period. Right? All these 3 buildings belongs to the same class of period. It belongs to the same class of asset. Right? So friends, when you see the class of asset, you need to see all those assets which are eligible for short term lease exemption. जो eligible ही नहीं है उसको आप कैसे इसमें देख सकते हो, right? So in this case, yes, it can do so. Okay. Question number 3. Can the lessee wants to apply the short-term lease exemption to building number 1, but wants to apply the ROU accounting to building number 2 and 3. Okay. Is this right?
No.
I have given you 3 questions. In these 3 questions, everything is clear. Is this right?
No, sir.
Why no?
The accounting policy should be same for
For the
all
class
the
of asset. For the
accounting.
class of asset, right? So whatever assets are there, whatever lease contracts are there, for a particular class of asset, whatever lease contracts are there, if all those lease contracts, if the short-term lease exemption can be applied, it has to be applied for those entire lease contracts, it has to be in the entirety, not as a cherry pick choice. Okay, cherry picking is not allowed. Correct? So this is not right. The lessee has to avail the exemption for the entire class of assets which are eligible for exemption. Anyone who is not clear after giving this example and after writing these 3 questions? Anyone who is still not clear? Yeah. You cannot forget the concept when you revise, when you read these 3 questions, you cannot forget the concept. Right? Perfect. Clear? Clear or clear? Clear? Okay. Very good. So my dear friends, a short-term lease exemption can be applied. A short-term lease exemption has to be applied for a lease contract which is for a 12-month or less, which is for 1 year or less. Okay, number 1. Number 2, the lease exemption has to be made by the class of underlying asset. The lease exemption has to be made by the class of underlying asset. Okay. Number 3, if there is a purchase option in the lease contract, right? If there is a purchase option in the lease contract, in that case, it is not a short-term lease. If there is a purchase option in the lease contract, it is not a short-term lease. Okay. So short-term lease exemption. Short-term lease exemption. What is that? The lease term should be 12 months or less. Okay. The election shall be made. By class of underlying asset to which the ROU relates. A lease that contains a purchase option is not a short-term lease. Question. A lessee has entered into a lease for a car for 1 year. There is a purchase option available to the lessee at the end of the lease term. At the end of the lease term. Right? Can lessee avail the short-term lease exemption? Short-term lease exemption. What is your answer?
No.
Of course no. वो तो मैंने ऊपर ही बता दिया. Answer. No. Why? Why? So let me copy paste. A lease that contains a purchase option is not considered as a short-term lease. Why? Because this asset will eventually belongs to the lessee. Okay. I hope this exemption is clear to everyone. Yeah. Illustration number 1 from ICAI study material. Scenario A. A lessee enters into a lease with a 9-month non-cancelable term with an option to extend the lease for 4 months. The lease does not provide any purchase option. At the lease commencement date, the lessee is reasonably certain to exercise the extension option. The lessee is reasonably certain to avail the optional renewal period because the monthly lease payments during the extension period are significantly below market rates. Whether the lessee can take a short-term exemption in accordance with Ind AS 116. First of all, tell me, answer it one by one. Tell me what is the lease period in this case? इस केस में लीज पीरियड क्या है? Sorry?
9 plus 4 months.
9 plus 4 months. Very good. So what is the total lease period?
13 months.
13 months. 13 months is lower than 12 months or higher than 12 months?
Higher.
Higher than 12 months. Okay. So in this case, can this lease contract is eligible for the short-term lease exemption?
No, sir.
It is not eligible for the short-term lease exemption. So on this exemption cannot be taken on this. Okay. It cannot be taken. Right? Sorry. Scenario B. Assume the same facts as scenario A. Same fact. Except at the lease commencement date, the lessee is not reasonably certain to exercise the extension option because the monthly lease payment during the optional renewal period are at what the lessee expects to be at the market rate. And there are other factors that would make exercise of the renewal option reasonably certain. Okay. Will your answer be different in this case?
Yes.
Yes,
What?
sir. Period
What is the
will be
lease
9
period?
months. 9 months. We will not include that 4 months.
You will not include that 4 months. Okay. It is 9 months. Right. And hence it will be considered, it is eligible for the short-term lease exemption. So my dear students, when you appear in examination, when you have a question, the question is not like illustration number 1, right? So these small illustrations are to understand the concepts, right? If I'll throw a 2-page bigger question, 2-page length question today, will you be able to solve? Answer is no, right? So in the big question, this will be the one part where a lot of information was given and this paragraph is also given inside that. So first of all, you always need to remember, if you have to solve the question in the examination paper as well as in your real life, you have to ask 4 questions. Question number 1, is it identified asset? Question number 2, whether right to control the use of asset has been transferred. Sir, if nothing is given in the question paper, आपको मानना पड़ेगा कि दोनों है. Are you getting me? अगर क्वेश्चन पेपर साइलेंट है तो ये मत मानना कि दिस इज नॉट एन आइडेंटिफाइड एसेट. करेक्ट? तब ये मानना कि दिस इज आइडेंटिफाइड एसेट. राइट? So it is assumed that it is identified asset, lease contract hai, right? But if the question has given you some information that the lessor has substantive right to replace the asset, in that case you have to demonstrate that, since in this case the lessor has a substantial right to substitute the asset, replace the asset, and hence it is not meeting the criteria of identified asset, and hence this contract is not a lease contract under Ind AS 116. Okay, this is what you need to consider. Understood? Likewise, so one, you have concluded it is identified asset, the right of control of use has been transferred. Then you need to compute the lease period. What is the lease period? Right? And what is the lease period? Non-cancelable period plus rent-free period plus optional renewal period if the lessee is reasonably certain to renew, plus optional termination period if the lessee is reasonably certain to not to exercise the termination option, right? If it is less than 12 months or up to 12 months, your answer would be different. Your answer would be different. Okay. Correct. And if it is more than 12 months, of course, you cannot avail your short-term lease exemption. I hope it is clear. I hope it is clear. Right. Friends, then the other exemption is low value lease exemption. What is meant by low value lease exemption? So the first exemption was exemption number 1, short-term lease. Exemption number 1, short-term lease. Okay. What is my exemption number 2? What is my exemption number 2? My exemption number 2 is low value leases exemption. Low value lease exemption. Low value leases. What is low value leases? Low value leases. Leases where the value of the underlying asset, underlying asset is of low value, like furniture, computer, printer, office equipment, mobile, etc. You must have seen in many companies nowadays, these printers. Have you seen these big printers in many companies? The companies are not purchasing these printers. The companies are taking these printers on a lease basis, right? Where the vendor is responsible for maintaining that printer, where the vendor is responsible for giving that printer, and the company are taking those printers on a lease basis. Okay. Have you seen that? देखा नहीं देखा? आप लोगों ने देखा होगा ना, आप जब ऑफिस में जाते हो, so in many companies the printer are there, the computer, laptop in the pantry or cafeteria. Have you seen the coffee vending machine from Costa or CCD? The coffee vending machine, there's a water purifier. Okay. So friends, what happened? Many companies are taking this computer, laptop, printer, coffee and coffee vending machine, water purifier, etc., on lease basis. If the company start doing the capitalization of right of use asset and lease liability, don't you think it will be a big mess? Just think about a company like Reliance. Just think about company like Bharti Airtel, which has offices all across India, even outside India, right? And every office, you need some, tea, coffee vending machine, water purifier, you need at least printer. So these are the low value assets, right? If you see the value of the new asset, it is 50,000, 40,000, 1 lakh rupee, 90,000, 80,000, right? So standard says that if you have entered into a contract to acquire low value leases, low value items leases, in that case, you are free to not to apply Ind AS 116 accounting. You can do a normal accounting of rent account debit to bank account, Okay. Okay. So the standard has not given you any threshold. It is a matter of judgment. The companies are making their accounting policy that if they are purchasing, if they are taking any asset on a lease basis, which is having a value of up to rupees 5 lakh. I'm just giving an example. कि कंपनीज अकाउंटिंग पॉलिसी बना लेती हैं, अपनी एक पॉलिसी बना लेती हैं कि अगर मैं कोई भी एसेट को लीज पे लूंगा जिसकी वैल्यू, उस एसेट की वैल्यू, नॉट रेंट की वैल्यू, उस एसेट की वैल्यू अगर 5 लाख रुपए तक है, आई विल कंसिडर दैट एज अ लो वैल्यू लीजेस, राइट? प्रिंटर की वैल्यू कितनी होगी? 1 लाख रुपए, 70,000 रुपए। फर्नीचर की वैल्यू, कंप्यूटर की वैल्यू, लैपटॉप की वैल्यू, मोबाइल की वैल्यू, राइट? So these items can be considered for a low value leases exemption, right? Clear? If the lessee is subleasing, if the lessee is subleasing the asset, it cannot be if the lessee is subleasing the asset, then the lease contract is not eligible for low value lease exemption. Low value leases exemption. Example. The lessee has taken a printer on a lease for 3 years. 3 years. Okay. 3 years. And subleases to other party for a period of 2 years. Whether the head lease is eligible for low value lease exemption, considering the printer is a low value item. Yes or no?
No.
Answer no. Why no? No.
Maybe
No. Why? Sir,
because
why?
if it is subleasing, then it cannot take that low value exemption.
No, why? Because it is subleasing. Okay. Sir, copy paste. No. If the lessee is subleasing the asset, then the lease contract is not eligible for low value exemption. Okay. Because it is subleasing. So this is the exception. This is the exception, right? This is the low value lease concept. Sir, what is the accounting entry? Accounting entry. In case the lessee is availing what? The lessee is availing the exemptions. Short-term lease or low value lease. Acha, one question. Since this printer, let's say it would not be a subleasing, okay? Second example, the lessee has taken a printer on a lease for 3 years. For lease for 3 years. Lease for 3 years for its own use. Okay. Whether the lease is eligible for low value lease exemption, considering the printer is the low value item.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
But in this case, the contract is for 3 years.
So we are taking on the basis of low value, not on the basis of that term.
Very good. So normally what happened, the students got confused कि ये तो exemption में आ ही नहीं सकता. It is not, you are not taking the exemption of short term lease, right? So you are taking the exemption because it is a low value item, right? Because it is a low value item. So friends, yes, when you are taking the exemption of low value lease, you have to ignore the lease period. You have to ignore the lease period, I mean to say, Doesn't matter whether the lease period is for 10 year, 15 year, 2 years, 6 years, or 6 months, right? You have to see what is the nature of that item. If that item is kind of a low value, in that case, you can take a low value exemption irrespective of the lease period. And you have to do what accounting? You have to do rent expense to bank accounting. The accounting which you are following since your class 11th, right? Rent account debit to bank account. Okay. Is that clear? Is that clear? So answer. Yes. Low value exemption is allowed. Yes, Anu, you're right. If any one condition is satisfied, whether it is low value or short term, then you can avail the exemption. Okay. Then you can avail the exemption. Accounting entry. बता दो अब आप accounting entry क्या होगी, मैं तो बता चुका हूं. What is the accounting entry in case the lessee is availing the exemption? ROU to lease liability?
No ROU, sir.
No ROU. Then what is the accounting?
On the basis of SLM or another systematic basis, we will charge it to P&L.
What is meant by another systematic basis? So accounting entry is rent, expense, account, debit to lessor account, credit. And then lessor account debit to bank, right? To bank. Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Very good. Now let's do a question. What is meant by systematic basis? It says that whenever you're taking an exemption, you have to charge your rental expenses on a systematic basis. What is meant by systematic basis? On a straight line basis, right? What is meant by that?
Can reflect the expense recognition against the its value of benefit that we have derived from that use of the asset to match that.
So let me explain with the help of this question. A limited lessee has taken an office equipment on a lease basis for a period of 2 years. Okay. For a period of 2 years. The first year rental is rupees 10,000. And the second year rental is escalated to 15,000. Advise the recognition of expense in year 1 and year 2. Tell me, what is the rent expense to in the year 1 and year 2? Friend, standard says that when you are taking this exemption, you have to recognize your rental expense on a straight line basis, right? On a straight line basis or another systematic basis. So when you have entered into a non-cancelable lease contract of 2 years, what is your expense in 2 years? What is your total expense in 2 years?
25,000.
What is your total expense in 2 years? 25,000, right? The total rent is how much? 10,000 plus 15,000. Okay. What is your average annual rent? What is your average annual rent?
12,500.
Divide by 2.
12,500. What is your accounting entry? Rent year 1. Accounting entry in year 1. Year 1. क्या accounting entry होगी? Rent expense account debit. How much? 12,500, right? 2. So let me directly put the accounting entry to bank. कर लूं मैं to bank account कर लूं ना? आप नाराज तो नहीं होगे?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. What is to bank account? How much this is? How much is going to be
10,000.
payable in year 1? Actual में
10,000.
बैंक से कितना पेमेंट होगा? 10,000. Very good. 10,000. So credit is 10,000. Debit is 12,500. I need to compensate this credit also. To what? To lease equalization. Lease equalization reserve. Equalization reserve. Debit. Debit or credit? Credit. Okay. Lease equal how much? 12,500 minus 10,000. So another liability is going to be created, which is nothing. It's a lease equalization reserve liability. Okay. Lease equalization reserve liability. समझ आया नहीं आया? What is the next entry in year 2? Year 2 में क्या entry होगी? Year 2. Rent expense account debit. What is the rent expense account? Debit कितने से होगा? 12,500.
That
Bank
equalization.
account credit. To bank account credit. How much?
15,000.
15,000. Where the difference will go?
Lease equalization.
Lease
equalization
equalization reserve. Whatever you have credited, that will be debited. $2,500, right? 2,500. So this is the meaning of that the lease expense has to be recognized on a systematic basis or a straight line method. Okay. This is the meaning of this. Is that clear? Clear or clear? Simple concept.
Clear in
So
mind.
what if we don't know that the second year rent will be increased?
What if we
Don't know that second year the rent is going to be increased.
then whatever rent is there, you have to debit it to P&L. Like for example, there is a rental of 2-year period, but the fixed rental is 10,000, and the second year rental is depending on some variable payment basis, okay, which you are not knowing as of now. It will be decided in the next year only. So in that case, you have to recognize your rent expense on the basis whenever it is incurred, right? In that case, equalization is not required. But sitting today, if you know that what is my total obligation in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, what is my total obligation? The total obligation has to be recognized on a straight line method, right? And why it is important, let me tell you, this concept was there in accounting standard 19 also for all the lease contract. So let's say first year rent is 10,000. Second year, there is an escalation of 10%. Third year, there is an escalation of 10%, right? So first year 10,000, second year 11,000, third year 12,100. So why straight line method concept was there in our accounting standard 19 also? Because when you are using this asset for 3 years, in the first year you are paying 10,000, in the second year you are paying 11,000, in the third year you are paying 12,100. The question was arised that we are debiting our rental expense by 10,000 in the first year, 11,000 in the second year, and 12,100 in the third year. Is it a right thing? Is it showing a right picture? Whether the first year rent expense is only 10,000, while we understood that we are paying 10,000, we are paying 11,000, we are paying 12,100. The payment is like that only, right? But expense we are recognizing on an accrual basis. So is it showing a right picture? Then the question was asked, why you are paying a rental of 11,000 in the second year? Because you have used the asset for the entire first year. Correct? Correct. Then your second year has come. Why you are paying the rental of 12,100 in the third year? Because you have used the asset for 2 years. So in that case, the standard told you that the standard has said that what you need to do, you need to compute the total rent, you need to compute the average rent, and you have to recognize the expense on a straight line basis on all these 3 years on the straight line basis. Even though if you would have owned the asset, what you were doing? जब आप asset purchase कर रहे थे तो depreciation कैसे charge कर रहे थे? Straight line method तब भी था ना?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So when you are purchasing the asset for the purpose of use, you are charging depreciation on straight line method. While other methods are also there, that is why standard has told you the other systematic basis as well, right? So when you are not purchasing but taking the asset on a lease basis, then why you are not straight lining? So this concept came from there. आप उसमें क्या कर रहे हो? आप right of use asset capitalize करते हो तो क्या कर रहे हो? What you are doing in ROU?
Depreciating again.
Depreciating on a straight line method. First of all, how you are computing ROU? How you are
Present year.
computing ROU?
Present value of lease payments.
All lease payment. You are taking all lease payment, taking it to the present value at a particular date, which is commencement date. आपने सारी लीज पेमेंट ले ली एक साथ, उन सारी लीज पेमेंट को आपने डिस्काउंट कर लिया, डिस्काउंट करके हम कमेंसमेंट डेट पे प्रेजेंट वैल्यू पे आ गए. नाउ दिस इज योर आरओयू एसेट. अब इस आरओयू का क्या करते हैं? डेप्रिसिएटिंग दिस आरओयू एसेट ओवर द लीज पीरियड ऑन अ स्ट्रेट लाइन बेसिस, on a straight line basis. Correct?
Yes, sir.
So your expense will be equalized, right? So this is what I'm doing here also. Here I'm not capitalizing ROU because I'm taking an exemption. So I'm debiting rent and crediting bank. So I'm equalizing that. Correct? Is that clear or clear?
Clear in mind.
Vinay is asking, do we need to separate the lease and non-lease component here also? Yes, Vinay. The lease and non-lease component needs to be separated in the lease contract. I will cover that, right? For example, the company has taken a building on a lease basis, and the company is also getting a security guard services from the lessor. Security guard service is a non-lease component. Building is a lease component. I will discuss that accounting, okay, separately. Ginny is asking, sir, is my question reaching you? Ginny, what is your question? Can you please repeat?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Sir, actually, I have asked related to the sublease. I have written in the chat box. I think whether not reaching to you.
What is your question?
Sir, in that, I want to ask that whether in subleasing, first the lessee think that he will use his the asset, and after 1 year he think that he should sublease. Then also the
Understood.
exemption will not
I
available.
understood your question. For example, the lessee has taken a printer on a lease basis for a period of 3 years, right?
Yes, sir.
So initially, lessee wants to use that asset, right? And lessee has used that asset for 1 year. Okay. So for the first year, what lessee has done, lessee has availed the low value lease exemption, and whatever amount is payable in the first year, lessee has debited rent and credited bank, right?
Yes,
But
sir.
when 1 year has passed on, so the lessee does not require that printer, or lessee do not want to use that printer, but it was a non-cancelable lease of 3 years, right? So at the end of the first year, the lessee decided to lease out that printer, sublease that printer, right? The moment the lessee has subleased, the lessee cannot avail the low value lease exemption because the factor has been changed, circumstances has been changed. Now the lessee is subleasing this printer, so lessee cannot avail low value lease exemption. At the end of the first year, whatever the remaining rental for 2 years is there, the lessee has to capitalize right of use asset and credit lease liability.
Okay, sir.
Okay, fine.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Very good. Friends, now we have discussed this initial recognition and measurement. Now we are entering into the Now we are entering into the subsequent measurement. Okay. Subsequent measurement. What is the difference between initial measurement and subsequent measurement?
Every year and we will measure the asset value, that is subsequent measurements.
Initial measurement happened at commencement date. Subsequent measurement happened at reporting date, right? Now the question comes, sir, on 1st of January, we have capitalized right of use asset. We have credited lease liability. But what happened on 31st March? What we will do on 31st March? Friends, on 31st March, whatever right of use asset you have capitalized, what you will do? You will depreciate. क्या करोगे? वो पता है ना आपको, right of use asset को depreciate करोगे over the period of lease. Correct? And lease liability का क्या करोगे? You have to charge interest. You have to charge interest on lease liability and you have to debit lease liability and pay the lease rent. Correct? This is what you need to do. Okay. So friends, as far as subsequent measurement is concerned, standard says that you need to apply cost model or revaluation model just like Ind AS 16, property, plant and equipment, right? Property, plant and equipment. If you are applying a cost model, let's say I have taken a building on a lease basis and I have another building also which is my owned building, which is my property, plant and equipment, and I am applying a cost model. So I will also apply cost model here as well. Okay. Sir, if I don't have any owned asset, then even in that case, if you have one building which is on a lease basis, you can apply the cost model. Sir, cost model means whatever is the cost of the ROU, you need to depreciate that ROU over the period of the lease, right? So cost minus accumulated depreciation minus accumulated impairment loss. So at the end of every year, what is your carrying value of ROU? Cost minus accumulated depreciation is the carrying value of my ROU. What else which can be changed? So friends, you need to depreciate, that is okay. If there is any change in the lease term, for example, when we have started initially, there was a lease period of 5 years. Okay. And there was an optional renewal period of 5 years also. But at the time of commencement date, it was not reasonably certain that the lessee will avail the optional renewal period. It was not reasonably certain. Okay. But when 3 years have passed, after 3 years, it has become reasonably certain that lessee is also going to avail the renewal option. 3 साल के बाद सर्टेन हो गया कि लेसी तो अवेल करेगा रिन्यूअल ऑप्शन. So after 3 years, what is the remaining lease term? After 3 years, what will become the remaining lease term? 7 years. शुरू में 5 साल का लीज टर्म था, 3 साल के बाद डिसाइड हुआ कि 5 साल और चलेगा. तो कितना हुआ रिमेनिंग लीज टर्म? कितना हुआ आफ्टर 3 years? It is 7 years is the remaining lease term. Yes or no? I'm not getting any response.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So 7 years is the lease term. Don't you think at the end of the 3rd year, when we come to a reporting date, at the end of the 3rd year, my right of use asset and my lease liability is as per the old terms? I mean to say, at the end of the 3rd year, my remaining lease liability and ROU asset is limited to 2-year period only, right? Technically speaking. But now my lease term has been extended. So my lease liability should be increased. पुराने हिसाब से तो सिर्फ 2 साल की लीज लाइबिलिटी बची है, बट अब 7 year की लीज लाइबिलिटी बची है. So standard says that at the reporting date, at the subsequent measurement, you need to see if your lease liability is going to be remeasured. Whatever impact is there on the remeasurement of lease liability, that impact is also going to be taken in the ROU asset. We will discuss that part. हम modification discuss करेंगे अभी We will discuss remeasurement of liability, modification of liability. We will discuss lease modification, right? What is depreciation? Standard says that depreciation is depending on the useful life of the asset, right? Sir, what is meant by useful life of the asset? Friends, if there is a purchase option available, in case of airline company, for example, an airline company has taken an aircraft on a lease basis for a period of 10 years. एक एयरलाइन कंपनी ने एयरक्राफ्ट 10 ईयर की लीज पे लिया, ओके, एंड देयर इज अ परचेज ऑप्शन अवेलेबल टू दैट कंपनी, right? And the exercise price is very low. So the airline company can purchase the aircraft at the end of the expiry of the lease. The airline company can purchase the aircraft at a very nominal price, right? So friends, standard says that if there is a purchase option available, if lessee intends to purchase the asset, then the asset is going to be depreciated. Right of use asset is going to be depreciated over the useful life of the asset. You remember when we were considering the lease payment, we have also considered exercise price in case of a purchase option. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
You remember now? We have also considered the third leg was exercise price in case of a purchase option. So friends, for example, the company has taken an asset on a lease basis for a period of 10 years. And after that, there is an exercise price, okay, because the purchase option is available. What is my right of use asset? My right of use asset is equal to present value of lease liability, present value of lease payment, plus what? Present value of lease payment. And what lease payment include? Lease payment includes annual payment plus exercise price. It means your lease payment already included the purchase price also. Means your right of use asset includes your purchase price as well. Your right of use asset includes your purchase price as well, right? And you are going to purchase the asset, and the useful life of the asset is 20 years. Lease period is 10 years. Useful life of the asset is 20 years because you are going to purchase the asset. So in that case, whether this right of use asset needs to be depreciated over a period of 10 years or 20 years?
20 years.
20 years. But if the lessee does not have a purchase option, the lease term is 10 years. In that case, what is the life of ROU? 10 years or 20 years?
10.
10 years, right? So friends, ROU asset needs to be depreciated over the useful life of the asset or lease period, whichever is lower or higher. If the lessee is going to purchase the asset over the useful life of the asset, if the lessee is not going to purchase the asset, then earlier of useful life or period of use. For example, the lessee has taken an asset on a lease basis for a period of 5 years. 5 साल की लीज पे लिया, बट उस एसेट की लाइफ ही 3 साल है. यूजफुल लाइफ 3 साल है, मतलब द लेसी विल ओनली बी एबल टू यूज द एसेट फॉर 3 years. वो मिनिमम मार्केट में लीज कॉन्ट्रैक्ट जो है 5 साल से कम का बनता नहीं है, और फॉर दैट आइटम फॉर एग्जांपल. बट लेसी को सिर्फ 3 साल के लिए चाहिए एसेट. कई बार होता है ना, जब आप मेडिसिन शॉप पे मेडिसिन लेने जाते हो, आप कहते हो गिव मी 2 टैबलेट, और वो स्टोर वाला क्या कहता है? यू हैव टू परचेज द एंटायर स्ट्रिप. कहता है ना, आपको पूरा पत्ता लेना पड़ेगा. यू हैव टू परचेज द एंटायर स्ट्रिप ऑफ 10 टैबलेट. ये मेरे साथ तो हुआ है. हैव यू गाइज हैव विटनेस दिस काइंड ऑफ अ सिचुएशन? Yes or no?
Sir, your voice is breaking in between for a little span of time.
Am I audible now? Am I clear and loud?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So my question to you guys is, when you have gone to a medicine store and you have asked for 2 or 3 tablet, but the shopkeeper has told you, I cannot give you 2 and 3 tablet. I have to give you the entire strip of 10 tablet. So my question is, what is the lease period? What is the total period? What is the total quantity of this strip? 10. What is the useful life to you?
2.
2 or 3, whatever you want to buy. So friends, if the lessee is going to purchase the asset, of course, useful life of the asset is the period over which this ROU is going to be depreciated. And you understood why? क्योंकि exercise price भी ROU में आ गया, purchase price भी आ गया ROU में, right? Number 2, if lessee is not going to purchase option is not there. Earlier of 2 tablet or 10 tablet. Earlier of 2 tablet or 10 tablet. Is that clear? Earlier of useful life or period of use. Normally it is always lease period, but if your useful life of that asset is lesser than the lease period, then of course आप उसी में करोगे ना, useful life में तो करोगे. Depreciation has to be provided on SLM basis. Apply Ind AS 16 principles. कि Ind AS 16 आप एक बार अच्छे से पढ़ लो, उसके बाद उसका रिवीजन Ind AS 38 में होगा, Ind AS 40 में होगा और Ind AS 116 में होगा. Okay. Revaluation model. If the asset which the lessee has taken on a lease basis, the lessee has same assets as per its owned portfolio as well. Lessee has taken an office building on a rental basis in Delhi. Lessee has office building in Mumbai, Ludhiana, Panipat, Amritsar. Lessee has 4 building. Okay. And 5th building lessee has taken on a lease basis. Same class of asset, right? And for the 4 building, lessee is opted for revaluation model. So standard says that if in case the right of use asset belongs to the class of PP to which lessee chooses to apply revaluation model under Ind AS 16, so आपको उस पे भी revaluation model apply करना पड़ेगा. किस पे? Right of use asset पे भी you need to apply revaluation model. Okay. Friends, you need to impair your right of use asset as well. आपको right of use asset की impairment भी करनी पड़ेगी. You have to check right of use asset for impairment. Sir, how can we impair right of use asset? For example, the classic example is due to COVID. A lessee has entered into a lease contract for 10 years. Okay. The lease rental was 5 lakh rupees per year. Annual lease rental is 5 lakh rupees. After 3 years, COVID came and the rental has been drastically, significantly down. In that vicinity, the rental has been dropped to 2 lakh rupees from 5 lakh rupees. ये practically हुआ था ऐसा. Even in a society in which I am living, the rent was 30,000 rupees at the time of COVID. It has gone down to 23,000 rupees. So 30-40% rental has gone down. Right. So my non-cancellable lease contract is 5 lakh rupees per annum for a period of 10 years. Contractually, I am obligated to pay 5 lakh rupees per annum. And I have created my right of use asset on the basis of 5 lakh rupees per annum for 10 years. After 3 years, COVID came. For remaining 7 years, I need to pay 5 lakh rupees per annum. But the market rentals are 2 lakh rupees per annum. If you would have entered today, into the lease contract for such premises, whether your ROU will be as per 5 lakh or as per 2 lakh, whether your rentals lease contract would be at around 2 lakh or 5 lakh, किसके हिसाब से होता? 2 लाख के हिसाब से या 5 लाख के हिसाब से? 2 lakh. If it would have been at 2 lakh, whether your ROU and lease liability, whether your ROU value should have been lesser or should have been higher? It should have been lesser. कम ही होगी ना. So what does it mean? It means the asset which I am carrying, right? My right of use asset which I am carrying, its recoverable value is much lower than the carrying value. Impairment will arise or not arise? Impairment will arise. Impairment will arise. Okay. Right. So my dear friends, ROU asset is also subject to impairment. Hemant, now have you understood how this impairment can come? Yeah. You need to compute the recoverable value. What is the recoverable value? Value in use. Okay. What is the impairment indicator? The market rentals has gone down is the impairment indicator. Lease liability. Friends, what is the treatment of lease liability at the time of subsequent measurement? क्या करोगे lease liability का? You need to charge interest. You need to pay rental. Your lease liability will be increased by interest expense and decreased by lease payments. So this is the subsequent measurement, my dear friends. This is subsequent measurement. What is your expense? What is your expense recognition in case of Ind AS 116? You need to charge depreciation on ROU asset. You need to charge interest expense on lease liability, and variable lease payment is also come into P&L. Which variable lease payment? कौन सी?
Which were not dependent on index and rate.
Which are not dependent on index or a rate. Which is depending on a sales value. For example, you have to pay 10,000 rupees of rent and 1% of the sales. So that 1% of the sales will not come under to the lease payment. It will not come under the lease payment means whenever this rent has to be payable, that rent has to be charged to the expense in the P&L. Impairment of the ROU asset. If there is an impairment, it will also come into the P&L. So these four things will come into P&L in Ind AS 116 in the lessee's P&L. Okay. Illustration number 30. Now let's discuss illustration number 30, right? Where we will cover the subsequent measurement also. Can I do illustration number 30? Lessee accounting. Entity ABC, lessee, enters into a 3-year lease of equipment. So what is my lease period? 3 years. Okay. Entity ABC agrees to make the following annual payment at the end of the each year. End mein payment ho rahi hai. Okay. At the end. What is meant by at the end? I mean to say, if it is at the end, it means the discounting will start from the first year, right? 20,000 in year 1, 30 in year 2, 50 in year 3. Okay. The total payment is 20 plus 30 plus 50, 1 lakh. For simplicity purposes, there are no other element to the lease payments, like purchase option is not there, lease incentive is not there, initial direct cost is not there. Assume the discount rate of 12%, which is entity ABC's incremental borrowing rate, because the interest rate implicit in the lease cannot be readily determined. Entity ABC depreciate the ROU asset on a straight line basis over the lease term. How would entity ABC would account for the said lease under Ind AS 116, right? Simple calculation or complex calculation? What should we do?
Simple.
20,000, 30,000, 50,000, 3 cash flow hai. What is your discount factor? 1 divided by 1.12, 0.892. Again divide by 1.12, 0.797. Again divide by 1.12, 0.711, right? So your total lease payment is 1 lakh. 77,364 is the present value. What is the accounting entry on the commencement date? What is the accounting entry on the commencement date?
ROU debit.
ROU asset.
ROU asset debit to lease liability by 77,364. Right. Now, what should I do? What should I do for this ROU asset? Lease period is 3 years. I need to depreciate this ROU asset. What is the accounting entry? Depreciation to accumulated depreciation, right? So 77,364 divided by 3. It will comes out as a 25,788, right? So first year closing balance 51,000. Second year closing balance 26,000. Third year closing balance 0, right? Okay. Now, what should happen with the lease liability? My opening balance of lease liability is 77,364. Opening balance 77,364. I will charge an interest of 12%. It is coming out at 9284. Then I'll make a lease payment of 20,000. My closing balance at the end of the first year is 66,000. On this 66,000, I will charge interest at the rate of 12%. Then I'll pay 30,000. My closing balance is 44,000. On this 44,000, I will charge an interest of 12%. Then I'll pay 50,000. My closing balance will become 0. What is the accounting entry for this interest expense?
Interest expense account debit to lease liability.
Interest expense account debit to lease liability. And what is my payment entries? Lease liability to bank, right? What is the first entry? ROU asset to lease liability. Now my lease liability is at 77,364. Then I have make an entry interest expense to lease liability. My lease liability has increased by interest expense also. Then I'll make an entry lease liability to bank. My lease liability has been reduced. Okay. So this is what the accounting entries are there. Okay. Right. These are the accounting entries. Do I need to repeat these accounting entries? Yes or no? Okay, then we will cover illustration number 31. Illustration number 31. So let's take a break of 10 minutes before we will move on to the illustration number 31. It's 8:27 now. Let's have a 10 minutes break. We will start at 8:37. Okay. Ashok ji, break start. Yes. So let's solve illustration number 31. Subsequent measurement using cost model. Just a minute. Let me copy this illustration and take you on the Excel file. Let me know if my Excel is visible. Illustration number 31. I hope this illustration number 31 is visible to everyone. Company EFG enters into a property lease with entity H. The initial term of the lease is 10 years with a 5-year renewal option. So what is given in this question? Lease term is 10 years, right? First of all, lease term is given. What is lease term? Lease term is 10 years. Lease term. $10. The initial term of the lease is 10 years with a 5-year renewal option. Okay, renewal option is 5 years. The economic life of the property is 40 years and the fair value of the leased property is 50 lakhs. What is the economic life of the property? The life of the property is also given in the question. The life of the property is 40 years. 40 years. And the fair value of the leased property is 50 lakh. Okay. So fair value of the property is also given. Fair value of the property. 50 lakhs. Company EFG has an option to purchase the property. Company EFG has an option to purchase the property at the end of the lease term for rupees 30 lakhs. Okay. EFG has an option to purchase the property at the end of the lease term, means after 10 years. So there is a purchase option which is also available. Purchase option. Whether purchase option is available. So purchase option is available. Yes. Lessee is reasonably certain to avail the purchase option. Company EFG has an option to purchase the property at the end of the lease term for rupees 30 lakhs. Right. The first annual payment is rupees 5 lakh with an increase of 3% every year thereafter. Implicit rate of interest is 9.04%. Entity H gives company EFG an incentive of rupees 2 lakh, which is to be used for normal tenant improvement. Company EFG is reasonably certain to exercise that purchase option. It is given in the question that company EFG is reasonably certain to exercise that purchase option. प्रॉपर्टी की वैल्यू 50 लाख रुपए है, प्रॉपर्टी की लाइफ 40 साल है और ये भी रीजनेबली सर्टेन है कि एंटिटी विल अवेल द परचेज ऑप्शन. व्हाट डज इट मीन? व्हाट डज इट मीन? क्या मतलब है इसका?
We have to take that property life as 40 years for depreciation purpose.
Yes, it means if the purchase option is available and the entity is reasonably certain to avail, it means the useful life of 40 years I need to take for depreciating the ROU, right? For depreciating the ROU. Purchase option available, yes. Lessee is reasonably certain also. Reasonably certain to avail. Very good, Pooja. Thank you. Okay. Exercise price is given in this question. Company EFG has an option to purchase the property at the end of the lease term for rupees 30 lakhs. Whether exercise price is given in this question? Yes, 30 lakhs. 30 lakhs is the exercise price which is given in this question. Okay. Then What is my lease payment which is given in this question? What is my lease payments? What is my lease payment which is given in this question? My lease payment is, first annual payment is rupees 5 lakh with an increase of 3% every year thereafter, right? In this question, it is given that 5 lakh rupees of annual payment, 5 lakhs plus 3% increment escalation every year. 3% escalation every year. After that.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, in my module, the wordings are first advance annual payments. Sir.
First.
Advance annual payments. That
So
means
that is so
beginning.
I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. So that is clarified in the new module. So basically this illustration I have copy pasted from the last module. So in the new module it was clarified. Even though it has not been clarified, so in this question the indication was there that these payments are on an advance basis. So I'm coming to that, right? So first annual payment, assuming the same question has come in the exam, assuming, right? No advance and nothing is given. First annual payment is 5 lakh with an increase of 3% every year thereafter. Implicit rate of interest is 9.04%. Entity H gives company EFG an incentive of rupees 2 lakh. An incentive of rupees 2 lakh. Lease incentive. Lease incentive is also given in this question. Lease incentive. What is the lease incentive? 2 lakh receivable at the beginning of year 2. 2 lakh receivable at the beginning of year 2. Year 2 के beginning में मिल रहा है. And this question is silent whether it is advance or at the end of the year. Whether these rental payment are advance payment or at the end of the year payment. But the lessee is getting an incentive at the beginning of year 2. So what do you assume? If somebody has asked you to assume, and if the question is silent, and in this particular question, you have to assume whether it is an advance rental payment or it is a end of the year rental payment. What would you like to assume?
Advance.
Why?
Because incentive is offered at the beginning.
Incentive is also coming at the beginning of the year. And normally what happened, my dear students, normally if the lessor who is getting a lease rental, right? Lessor is paying back those rentals to the lessee when lessor is receiving those rentals, right? Lessor will receive and part of the amount lessor will give. So we will assume that these rentals are also paid at the advance, paid in advance. So what happened, Pooja? In the earlier module, the solution was as per the beginning of the year, advance rental. Then it was clarified in the new module. So this word was clarified that it has to be advance, right? Even though it has not been written, you have to consider this as a beginning of the year or advance. Why? Because incentive is also received by the lessee at the beginning of the year, at the advance of the year, right? Discount rate is also given in this question. Discount rate. What is the discount rate given in this question? 9.04%. This is the information which is given in this question. Anything else? Anything else which I've missed here? Anything which I've missed here? मैंने कुछ मिस तो नहीं किया यहाँ पे?
No, sir.
No? Okay. How would EFG measure the right of use asset and lease liability over the lease term? What is the demand of the question? The demand of the question in this question, we will measure right of use asset. We will measure lease liability. We will also compute the carrying value of the asset and liability over the lease term, right? Correct? Good question. अच्छा है नहीं ये question?
अच्छा
Yes.
है.
अच्छा है. Very good.
Yes.
So let's solve this question. What is my first step? What is my first step in solving this question? पहला step क्या होना चाहिए?
Present value of lease liability calculation.
Present value of lease liability calculation. Solution. So this is my solution. In this question, it is given that lease incentive is payable by the lessor at the beginning of year 2 we will assume that lease payments are also happening at the beginning of the year, right? This is what we will assume. Okay. Year. How many years are there? What is the lease term?
10 years.
Yes.
What is my lease term? 10 year. 1, 2. That's 1. This is the year. Just a minute. What is my lease payment? What is my lease payment? My lease payment is first year is 5 lakh. Then what is the escalation? Escalation kitna hai?
3%.
3%.
3%. So what is the next year lease payment? Into 103%. What is the next year lease payment? Third year. 103%. Correct? So on and so forth.
But sir, in the beginning of the second year, 2 lakh incentive has been paid.
I'm coming to
Yeah.
that. I'm just hold on. I'm coming to that. This is my lease payment. This is my increment of 3% every year, right? And there is a one-time lease incentive also, which is payable at the beginning of year 2, right? And we have considered all these payments at the beginning. In the beginning of the year 2, there is a lease incentive also of rupees 2 lakh, right? So what is my lease payment? What is my lease payment? Incentive. Whether the incentive is receivable at the end of the first year? No. What is the incentive at the end of the second year? 2 lakh. 2 लाख का इंसेंटिव है ना. इसके बाद कोई इंसेंटिव है? There is no incentive. There is no incentive, right? What is my net lease payment? What is my net lease payments? What is my net lease payment? मेरी net lease payment क्या होगी? In the first year, this much. In the second year, third year, fourth year. Is that okay? Pooja, is that okay now?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. What is my present value? Present value for the year 1. The payment is at the beginning.
1 I would take.
It is 1. In the second year, what is my present value? 1 divided by. So
heading of the column you have to change.
Yes. Heading of the column I need to change. The second one is 1 divided by 1.0904. Correct? So on and so forth. Okay. This is my present value factor. What is my PV? What is my PV? My PV is this multiplied by this. This is my PV. Okay. Right? This is my PV. Okay. 37, 36, 36. Is that question over?
No.
Have I considered all the lease payment?
So purchase option का भी present value consider करना
My
है.
lease payment will also include the purchase option. My lease payment will also include the purchase option, right? So I need to consider my purchase option as well. I need to consider my exercise price. And this will be, and this exercise price will be payable when? It will be payable at the end of the year 10. At the end of the year 10, right? So year 10. This is beginning or end? Beginning or end? आप कब पेमेंट करोगे एक्सरसाइज प्राइस? जब लीज टर्म खत्म हो जाएगा.
End.
सो पेमेंट कब होगी? बिगनिंग में या एंड में?
End में.
End of
End. Payment will be at the end of the lease term. End. Okay. What is the amount? 30 lakh. 30 lakh yen exercise price. Exercise price is 30 lakh. Yes. Amount is 30 lakh. 30 lakh. What is my net lease payment? Incentive is 0. What is my net lease payment? My net lease payment is 30 lakh. What is my discount factor? इस 30 लाख पे डिस्काउंट फैक्टर क्या होगा?
0.459 divided by 1.09 naught.
Very good, very good. Why? Because that 10th year was beginning. This is end. Divide by 1.0904. Right? 12,62,591. 12,62,591. Okay. What is my present value of total lease payment? What is my present value of total lease payment? Present value of total lease payment. What is my present value of total lease payment? This plus this is the present value of total lease payment. What is the accounting entry? What is the accounting entry? Right of use asset account debit. Right of use asset account debit. Debit to lease liability. Right. What is the value? 50,228,000. This is the value. This is the accounting entry. This is the initial measurement at the commencement date. This is my initial measurement at the commencement date. This is my initial measurement at the commencement date. Right? Now, what is my depreciation at every year? What is my depreciation every year? Since the purchase option is there, since the purchase option is there, so the ROU needs to be depreciated over the useful life of what? 10 year or 40 year?
40 years.
Over the useful life of property, which is 40 years. So what is my yearly depreciation? What is my yearly depreciation? Yearly depreciation on straight line method. Yearly depreciation is how much? 50,228,000 divided by 40. This is my yearly depreciation. ₹1,25,006. What is my accounting entry for depreciation? What is my accounting entry for depreciation? Depreciation account debit. Every year, depreciation account debit. Debit to accumulated depreciation. Every year. This is the amount every year. Any doubt so far in computation of right of use asset in the first entry, which is ROU to lease liability, in this depreciation entry? Any doubt? Any doubt so far? कोई doubt है? Is there any doubt? Yes or no? Everything is clear or not clear?
Yes, sir.
Clear? Okay, what about others? What about others? Clear? Okay, very good. Now let's go to the lease liability part. So depreciation, we have initially measured and recognized my ROU. I have depreciated ROU. Now let's go to the lease liability. Okay, what happens with the lease liability? What happens with the lease liability? Friends, first of all, let's prepare the lease liability schedule, because every year I have to charge interest also, and then I need to make a payment also. Lease liability schedule. What is the For how many year I need to prepare the lease liability schedule? For 10 year or 40 year? 10 year के लिए बनाऊंगा या 40 year के लिए बनाऊंगा?
10 years.
Yes.
Why 10 year? Because the property life is 40 year. Then why 10 year?
Lease is
So
only
lease-
for 10 years, after which he purchases the asset.
Very good. Because the obligation to pay rental is not 40 year. The obligation to pay rental is only 10 year, right? After 10 year, at the end of 10 year, the lessee will purchase the asset and lessee will become the owner of this asset. Okay. Yes. So there are 10 year of lease liability is there. Friends, after that 10 year, so let me put the opening balance of liability. Since the payment is at the beginning advance, so I'll put the lease payments first. Then I'll put the lease interest at the rate of 9.04%. Then there is a closing balance. What is my opening balance? Is 50 lakh 228 is my opening balance. What is my lease payment? Lease payment at the beginning of the year?
5 lakh.
5 lakh. My lease payment at the beginning of the year is 5 lakh. Right. I need to compute the interest also. Okay. At what value I need to compute the interest? This plus this multiply by 9.04% because this 5 lakh rupees has been paid on the first date. So I have to compute net of this payment. ठीक है ना? ऐसे ही करना है ना? Yes
sir.
or no? Yes? Okay. Then what is my closing balance? This plus this plus this. This is my closing balance. In the second year, this will become my opening balance. Again, how much I need to pay? How much I need to pay?
3,15,000.
3,15,000. 515 minus 2, 3,15,000. What is my interest? Same. This is my closing balance. Correct? 50 lakh. Now this will become my opening balance. This is the payment I need to make. Okay, 530. So you can see this is 530, right? This is my interest expense. This is my closing balance. Can I drag it to the 10 years? इसको लास्ट तक ड्रैग करूं मैं?
Yes, sir.
I am dragging the formula. Sir, this has come to 30 lakh. It has to be 0. But
So
this
that
has come to
exercise
30 lakh.
Exercise price 30 lakhs we have considered there. That's why it is coming here.
Yes. Again, at the end of 10th year, again, 10th year. What you need to do? This 30 lakh, you will pay 30 lakh. You will pay 30 lakh, right? You will pay 30 lakh. Okay. Is that clear? Is that clear? So what is the total lease payment you will make? You will make a total lease payment of how much? 85 lakh. You have to make a total lease payment of what? 85 lakh, right? You have to make a total lease payment of 85. Oh. Interest is 0. Your closing balance will also become 0. Okay. 85 lakh. What is your total interest? 35 lakh 31,712, right? And what is your opening? What is your opening balance? आपका टोटल इंटरेस्ट कितना है? 35 लाख है. आपकी लाइबिलिटी का ओपनिंग बैलेंस क्या है? 50 लाख है. So 50 lakh plus 35 is coming out at 85 lakh. Right? What is my annual payments? My annual payment is this one. What is my accounting entry? Every year, what is my accounting entry for lease payment? Interest expense account debit to
Lease
lease
liability.
liability. To lease liability. Credit, right? Lease liability. liability debit to bank. Right. Right. What is the accounting entry every year?
Sir,
One,
we will
one,
have to consider dates of these entries.
Sorry.
We have to consider dates of these entries, the sequence, because the payment is being made in beginning.
Yes. So these are the accounting entry. You're right. You have to maintain the sequence of this entry, right? आपको sequence maintain करना है. आपकी entry क्या क्या होंगी first year पे? This is my 406821. What is my payment entry? My lease liability entry is 5 lakh. So let's take this entry here. Okay. Right, Pooja? Sir, in examination, if I put the entry of interest cost first and then lease liability, whether my number will be deducted? Answer is no. It will not be deducted. Okay. So these are the accounting entries. Shall I drag the accounting entry for the entire 10 year or should I leave it here only? क्या करूं? Drag करूं इसको accounting entry को? Can you drag this accounting entry up to 10 years? Should I leave it? No one is answering. Okay, you want me to complete this? You want me to complete this? Okay. Let me complete this. Sorry?
It is understood, sir. Like,
Understood? Okay. $450. Rest you can do, okay? Rest you can do. I hope this question is clear to everyone now. This question is clear to everyone now. Yeah. What is the entry after 10 years? This 30 lakh rupees payment has to be made. Again, lease liability account debit to bank account. Same 30 lakh. Okay. So this was illustration number 31. Let's again go back to the presentation and this lease and non-lease component I'll cover later on. Now let's discuss lease modification. Very, very, very important aspect. Lease modification. Friends, if your question paper will be tough and complex, always remember you will have at least one question from lease modification. Very, very, very important. What is meant by lease modification? Okay. Lease modification means a change in the scope of the lease or a change in the consideration for a lease. A change in the scope of the lease or a change in the consideration for a lease. Right. That was not part of the original terms and condition of the lease. That was not part of the original terms and condition of the lease. Friends, I have entered into a contract with my landlord, with my lessor, for taking a house on a rental basis for a period of 5 years. In the first year, I am paying a rent of rupees 1 lakh per annum. And there is a clause which says that rent will increase by 10% every year. So in the next year, I am paying 1,10,000. In the third year, I am paying 1,21,000. Friends, in this case, whether my consideration is changing every year. In this case, whether my consideration is changing every year. Yes, it is changing every year. Change तो हो रहा है ना consideration. My lease payment is changing Hemant. In the first year, it is 1 lakh. In the second year, it is 1,10,000. In the third year, it is 1,21,000. It is changing every year.
but it is already decided that it would change, sir.
Is
It
it a lease modification? Answer
No,
is
sir.
why? But while there is a change in the consideration of the lease every year, but it is already part of the original terms and condition of the lease contract, right? Sitting today on the commencement date, right? When the company has started leasing, when the company has entered into a contract, company is aware that yes, my lease rental will escalate it by 10% every year. So this change in consideration is part of the original terms and condition of the lease. And hence, this is not a lease modification. You have already factored this escalation while discounting your lease payments to a present value. These escalations are in substance fixed payment, which you have already considered in your lease payment, and you have discounted all those future lease payments to arrive at right of use asset and lease liability. Sir, then what is a lease modification? A lease modification means a change in the scope of the lease or a change in the consideration for a lease which was not form part of the original terms and condition. Stephen, just hold for a minute, right? Just hold for a minute. Try to understand this concept, then I'll answer your query also, okay? So friends, a change in the scope of a lease, what does it mean? For example, I have entered into a contract with my landlord for a period of 5 years. Okay. After 2 years, I told my landlord that please extend my period from 5 years to 8 years. Because my daughter is in, when 5 years will get completed, my daughter would be in class 9th, right? So I want you to please extend my period to 8 years so that my daughter will pass her 12th. Okay. So my landlord has agreed. So at the end of the second year, my remaining lease period as per the original contract was 3 years. But as per the revised contract, it becomes how much? 8 years, right? So there is a change in the scope of the lease. Why? Because my lease term has increased. Or I was taken a flat on a rent basis from the lessor, from the landlord. And what he has done, so basically it was a 4 BHK, it was a 4-room house. It was a 4-room flat. And lessor has kept 1 room with him. He has locked 1 room and he has put his few items in that room. Okay. Lessor has locked 1 room with him. I told lessor, one of my cousin is coming and he will be here with me only because he has to appear in CA final examination and he wants to live in Delhi and he wants to live with me. So after 2 years, I told him that I need this 4th room as well. Right, friends, the initial contract was for 3 rooms. Now I want 4 room. I want 4th room as well. Whether the scope is changing or not. The scope is changing. The scope is getting added, right? The scope is getting added. Okay. So whether this 4th room was part of the original terms and condition of the contract, it was not part of the original terms and condition of the contract. And hence, when I'm demanding the 4th room, it means the scope of the lease is getting increased, right? And hence, it will be considered as a lease modification. Okay. Or second example. So the lease contract was for 5 years. I have entered into a lease contract in 2019 with my landlord. And I told that. So we have agreed that 10% is the escalation every year. So in 20, the lease rent has been increased by 10%. In 21, the lease rent has again increased. Then I requested my landlord not to increase the lease rental. Why? Because the COVID came and the rental prices has surged. The rental prices has reduced. I requested my landlord not to increase the lease payments. Okay. And he agreed. And this not to consider the escalation was not part of your original lease contract. In the original lease contract, it was 10% escalation every year in the original lease contract, right? And I have also created my right of use asset as per the original terms and condition. And after 2 years, when I have requested my landlord and he also agreed not to increase the lease rental, in this case, there is a change in consideration of a lease. There is a change in consideration of a lease. I mean to say, whatever I have estimated and agreed versus what I'm paying, there is a change, right? There is a change. This is considered as a change in the consideration of a lease. Friends, a change in the scope of a lease or a change in the consideration of a lease which was not part of the original terms and condition of the lease. For example, adding or terminating the right to use one or more underlying assets, extending or shortening the contractual lease term, right? So these are considered as a lease modification. These are considered as a lease modification. Sir, what is the accounting in case of a lease modification? This is what we are going to discuss. The accounting of lease modification. This is what we are going to discuss, right? Is that clear? So friends, we are discussing lease modification. We are discussing lease modification. Okay. हम क्या डिस्कस कर रहे हैं? We are discussing lease modifications. Yeah. Okay. I hope this Excel file is visible. Whether Excel file is visible to all of you? No?
No.
Okay. So let me take you to the Excel file. Lease modification. Lease modification will arise in three situations, right? Which were not formed part of the original terms and conditions. Very, very, very important concept, friends. Lease modification will arise in three situations which were not part of the original lease terms and conditions. For example, change in the scope of the lease. Change in the scope of the lease. What is meant by change in the scope of the lease? For example, adding or decreasing the underlying asset. Let's say from 10,000 square feet to 15,000 square feet, or from 10,000 square feet to 6,000 square feet. So either the scope has increased or scope has decreased subsequently. Second, change in consideration. What is meant by change in consideration? For example, from 20,000 rent to 25,000, or from 25,000 to or from 20,000 to 15,000. Either rent is increasing or decreasing, which were not form part of the original terms and conditions. Change in the lease term. For example, 10 year to 15 year or 10 year to 6 years, right? Increasing or decreasing your lease term. So these are the three situations where your lease modification will arise. And of course, these three situations should not form part of the original terms and condition. Any question here? Any question? Friends, any question here? Yes or no? No question?
No.
Sir, what is the lease modification accounting? Please tell us. Okay. Friends, whenever there is a lease modification, there could be two scenarios. Whenever there is a lease modification, whenever there is a lease modification, number one, what is the scenario whenever there is a lease modification? Either it will be treated as a separate contract, okay? क्या होगा? या तो एक सेपरेट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट ट्रीट होगा, either it will be treated as a separate contract, और क्या हो सकता है? आप जब लीज मॉडिफिकेशन करोगे तो क्या होगा? या नया कॉन्ट्रैक्ट होगा या फिर मॉडिफिकेशन होगी एग्जिस्टिंग कॉन्ट्रैक्ट में, और इट इज अपडेशन और एडजस्टमेंट इन द एग्जिस्टिंग कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, or it will be treated as an adjustment to existing contract, right? Or it will be treated as an adjustment to existing contract. Okay, right? Friends, if it will be treated as a separate contract, then what happened? अगर सेपरेट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट है तो क्या करेंगे? बड़ा सिंपल है ना.
You will create a fresh ROU.
Yes.
A different ROU.
Yes. So no change in the ROU or lease liability of the existing contract. There is no change in the ROU or lease liability of the existing contract. Why? And create a new ROU and lease liability for the new terms, है ना? For the new terms, new contract. Okay, for the new contract. Okay, for the new contract. But if it will be treated as an adjustment to existing contract, then what will happen? Then what will happen? Then there is a change in the ROU or lease liability of the existing contract. There is a change in ROU. There is a change in ROU or lease liability of the existing contract. Okay. Right? There is a change in the ROU or lease liability of the existing contract. Now the question is, sir, when a lease modification will be treated as a separate contract? When? Right? Standard says that if there is a change in the scope of the lease, like your lease scope is increasing, and that increase is in line with the market rentals, in that case, that increase will be treated as a separate contract. Sir, iska kya matlab hua? For example, let's say who is there? Hemant. Hemant has entered into a lease contract for a flat with his landlord. And landlord told, you know, Hemant, I have 4 rooms. Okay. So Hemant told, sir, I need only 3 rooms. I need only 3 rooms. So landlord told, okay, I'll charge 15,000 rupees rental. 5,000 rupees per room I will charge as a rental. And there was a lease contract of 5 years. After 1 year, because Hemant's cousin was coming, so Hemant has requested for giving 4th room as well to from the landlord. So landlord has agreed to give him the 4th room, right? So there could be 3 scenarios. Scenario number 1, the lessor will give him the 4th room free of cost. No paisa, no charge. If the lessor will give him free of cost, is there any accounting for that?
No, sir.
No accounting. Second situation, lessor has told, see, the cost of my room, the rental cost of my room is 5,000 per room. Okay. If you want to take this 4th room, please give me 5,000 also, right? My rental will increase by 5,000. It means the lease contract for the 4th room, the scope which I have increased from 3 rooms to 4 rooms, the increased scope is also negotiated at a market rental, right? जो फेयर रेंटल है, जो मार्केट रेंट है, वो 5,000 रुपीज है, और इसी 5,000 रुपीज पे उसको जो एडिशन हुआ है स्कोप में, द एडिशनल स्कोप हैज बीन गिवन ऑन द मार्केट रेंटल. सो स्टैंडर्ड सेज दैट इफ increase in the scope is commensurating with the market rental, with the market value, with the fair value, in that case it has to be treated as a separate contract. But third situation, Hemant has requested the landlord, sir, I have taken 3 rooms from you, right? And now I am only requesting 1 room. I understand market rental is 5,000 rupees, but sir, please consider this entire flat as a single flat, right? And give me this 4th room also at 2,500 rupees. And don't consider this as a 2,500. Consider this like I am paying 17,500 for the full flat. Friends, in this case, whether the additional scope is at market rental? Answer is no. Additional scope is not at market rental. So it will be considered as an adjustment to the existing contract, right? और हेमंत भी कैसे बात कर रहा है? हेमंत भी बात कर रहा है कि सर आप इसको पूरे कॉन्ट्रैक्ट को एक देखो. Correct. So in this case, it will be treated as an adjustment to existing contract. Why? Because the additional scope, the increase in scope is not in line with the market rentals, right? This will be treated as an adjustment to the existing contract. And hence there will be a change in the ROU or lease liability of the existing contract. Is that clear? Is that clear or not clear? Okay, so let's put one question here. A Limited has entered into the lease contract of 10,000 square feet of space, at the rate of 50 rupees per square feet. Example. At the rate of 50 rupees per square feet of monthly rental for a period of 5 years. After 2 years, A Limited has entered into an addendum to extend the area by 5,000 square feet at the rate of 50 rupees per square feet, which is commensurate with the market rental of the property. Now, what is the treatment of this amendment? What is the treatment of this modification? क्या होगा treatment?
Since it is as per standards, it would be as per, I mean, it would be treated as a separate and a new agreement, new
Yes.
lease contract.
Yes, yes. It has to be treated as a separate contract, which is separated from 10,000 square feet. So this 5,000 square feet of contract will be treated as a separate contract. The increase in consideration is on the basis of the fair value of the increase in the scope, and hence this contract will be considered as a separate contract and not as an adjustment to the existing contract. Hence, a fresh ROU and lease liability needs to be recognized for the additional space of 5,000 square feet of area, right? This will be treated as a separate contract. Okay. I hope you have understood the meaning of lease modification. Correct? This we have discussed when lease modification will be accounted for as a separate lease. Increase in scope of the lease by adding the right to use one or more underlying asset, and increase in consideration by an amount commensurate with the standalone price for the increase in scope. Standalone price means आपको overall नहीं देखना, आपको standalone देखना है कि what is the fair value of this additional scope. Like in case of Hemant, the fair value of the additional room was 5,000 rupees, but Hemant has negotiated at 2,500 rupees, right? So it means it was not at a market rental, and hence in that case, it has to be treated as an adjustment to the existing contract. Let's discuss illustration number 33. Lessee enters into a 10-year lease for 2,000 square meter of office space. At the beginning of year 6, 10-year का lease contract है, okay? At the beginning of year 6 means 5 years to go, end of the year 5. Lessee and lessor agrees to amend the original lease for the remaining 5 years to include an additional 3,000 square meter of office space in the same building. Okay? In the same building. Just hold on for a minute. At the beginning of year 6, lessee and lessor agrees to amend the original lease for the remaining 5 years to include an additional 3,000 square meter of office space in the same building. Okay. So there is an increase in the scope. Earlier it was 2,000 square meter. Now there is an additional 3,000 square meter. Okay. The additional space is made available for use by the lessee at the end of the second quarter of year 6. The increase in total consideration for the lease is commensurate with the current market rate for the new 3,000 square meter of office space, adjusted for the discount that lessee receives, reflecting that lessor does not incur cost that it would otherwise have incurred if leasing the same space to a new tenant, for example, marketing cost. How should the said modification be accounted for? So there is one information which is given in the question, and this is the information. What is the information? This lessor has given a discount to the lessee, right? So for example, let's say Nisha has taken this office space of 2,000 square feet, 2,000 square meter. She has also requested for another 3,000 square meter, right? The rate was 100 rupees per square feet. So she got this 3,000 square feet at 100 rupees per square feet or per square meter. Nisha told to the lessor that, Mr. Lessor, sir, if you would have sell this office space or let out this office space to somebody else, not to me, right? You would have got this space through the broker. Like you remember, when I took this 2,000 square meter, you have let out through a broker to whom you and me both have paid the commission. Sir, since I am requesting this 3000 square meter, there is no broker who is involved in this transaction. So you will be able to save the brokerage. So why don't you pay at least the discount to that extent? And lessor agreed to give that discount, right? Friends, in this case, can I say that this 3000 square meter of office space is not in line with the market value of the rentals? Yeah. Can I say that कि discount की वजह से this is not at a market value? This is not at a fair value? Yes or no? I cannot say that, right?
No, sir.
Because practically what lessor is paying, what lessor is giving as a discount, the amount which lessor have saved, right? So you cannot say that this property is not at the fair value of the market rentals. Okay, this 3000 additional scope, increase in scope, is commensurating with the increase with the market rental, and hence this 3000 square meter is considered as a separate contract. The separate ROU lease liability is required to be created, okay, for this 3000 square meter, and for this 2000 square meter, it was a contract, existing contract, which will continue on the basis of the original terms and conditions, right? This is what it is there for illustration number 33. Now let's discuss illustration number 34. Illustration number 34. Please read this illustration. I'm giving you 30 seconds. Please read this illustration. Then I will read this illustration. Illustration number 34, a complete and complex illustration. I will solve this on Excel file as well, right? Please read this illustration. Modification that increases the scope of the lease by extending the contractual lease term. Here, scope is not increasing, term is increasing. So scope is increasing in terms of lease term. You remember I told you three scenarios. Number one, where the underlying asset is increasing or decreasing, where the lease term is increasing or decreasing, where the rentals are increasing or decreasing. There are three situations. Lessee enters into a 10-year lease for 5,000 square meter of office space. The contract is 10 year. The annual lease payments are rupees 1 lakh payable at the end of each year. Okay. So what is my annual lease payment? 1 lakh rupees and payable at the end of the each year, means from the first year discounting will start. The interest rate implicit in the lease cannot be readily determined. Okay. Lessee's incremental borrowing rate at the commencement date is 6% per annum. Lessee's incremental borrowing rate at the commencement date is 6%. At the beginning of year 7, after 6 years, but beginning of year 7, lessee and lessor agrees to amend the original lease by extending the contractual lease term by 4 years. At the beginning of year 7 means at the end of year 6. कितने साल बचे हैं? How much year are remaining at the end of year 6 or beginning of year 7? 4 years.
4 years.
Lessee and lessor agrees to amend the original lease by extending the contractual lease term by 4 years. Means 4 plus 4, 8 years. It means at the beginning of year 7, as per the original term, 4 years were remaining, but as per the revised term, 8 years are remaining. The annual lease payments are unchanged. That is rupees 1 lakh payable at the end of each year from year 7 to year 14, right? Lessee's incremental borrowing rate at the beginning of year 7 is 7% per annum. How should the said modification be accounted for? Have you understood this question? Have you understood or not understood this question? Please tell me.
Understood.
Understood this question? Okay. Okay. So let me solve this question. Illustration, very good illustration. Number 34 of ICAI study material. Right. What is given in this question? क्या क्या दिया हुआ है इस question? I hope my Excel file is visible to everyone. Is it visible?
Yeah.
So what is given in this question? Initial lease term is given 10 years. Lease payment 1 lakh. Discount rate at the commencement date is 6%. This is what which is given in the question. Correct? Initial lease term 10 year, lease payment 1 lakh, 6% is the discount rate at the commencement date. Discount rate at commencement date. At commencement date. Okay. 6%. What else is given in the question? There is a modification. Increase in lease term by 4 years. And what is the modification time? What is the modification time? Beginning of year 7. What is my lease term now? 14 year. This information is also given in the question. Okay. Friends, what is the discount rate at the modification date? Discount rate at commencement date is 6%. But what is my discount rate at modification date?
7%.
How much?
7%.
7%. This is given in the question, 7%. From the simple logic, I am asking you 2-3 questions. And you need to answer me from the simple logic, applying a simple logic. The lease term has been extended from 10 year to 14 year, right? Initially, when the ROU and lease liability was capitalized, the lease payment for 10 year would have been considered. The lease payment for 10 year was considered. Yes. Correct.
Yes, sir.
Now
Yes,
the
sir.
lease term become 14 years. So now you need to consider 14-year lease payment, right? So whether my ROU and lease liability would be higher or would be same?
Will be higher.
Higher.
Be higher. Simple है ना, आपको 10 साल की जगह 14 साल का अगर टोटल लीज पेमेंट देखोगे तो ज्यादा ही होगा ना. And in this question 6 year has already been passed. तो हम क्या बैकडेट से अकाउंटिंग चेंज करेंगे? आंसर इज नो. इट इज नॉट अ चेंज इन पॉलिसी, इट इज अ चेंज इन एस्टिमेट. ये क्या है? चेंज इन पॉलिसी है क्या?
No, sir.
No.
ये क्या करेक्शन ऑफ प्रायर पीरियड एरर है?
No, sir.
What is it? It is like a change in estimate. So today, at the beginning of year 7, I have decided it to extend to the next 4 years, right? So it is a change in estimate. It has always been prospective. It has always been prospective. So it means I have some assets and liabilities at the end of year 6. मेरे पास कुछ ROU asset और liability होगी at the end of year 6. Carrying value होगा ना ROU asset और liability का?
Yes, sir.
But my actual liability at the beginning of year 7 would be much higher than the liability sitting on at the beginning of year 7. Why? Because my lease period for 4 years has been extended. तो मेरी liability ज्यादा होगी. And I need to recompute my lease liability at the beginning of year 7. मुझे अपनी lease liability recompute करनी पड़ेगी ना. मेरे ROU का फॉर्मूला क्या होता है? ROU is equal to present value of lease payment, present value of lease liability. So I need to recompute my lease liability. मैं कैसे recompute करूंगा? Sitting on day 1 of year 7, I will compute what is my future lease payments. My future lease payment for the next 8 years. Right? For example, my lease payment is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then I need to discount. It. Right? In this case, when I compute the revised lease liability, whether I should consider 6% discount rate or 7% discount rate?
1%.
7%. क्यों? क्योंकि सर क्वेश्चन में दिया है Sir, because it is given in the question. तो question में तो जो दिया होता है हमें सब यूज करना होता है, right? Yes. So Pooja, we need to use everything which is given in the question. चाहे question ने confuse करने के लिए दिया हो तो भी.
No, sir, it is not necessary.
No, then what is the logic?
So lease payment which are going to be there from the year 7 to 14, which will reflect the respective 7% discounting factor.
So logically, when we consider the time value of money at the beginning of the transaction, at the commencement date, right? The horizon was 10 year. At that point of time, the horizon was 10-year period, right? When I'm computing my present value of lease payments today, when I've extended this by, when I've extended this by 4 year. So today when I'm estimating, if I have to take a loan, what is my incremental borrowing rate? If I have to take a loan, if I have to take a borrowing, what is the rate of interest which is charged by the bank from me? Correct? Bank मुझसे कितना charge करेगा? So I am considering for the next 8 years. For 8-year period, if I have to enter into a borrowing of, let's say, 50 lakh rupees, then what is the rate of interest to me? So it means the time value of money is important because the time is changing. The term is changing. The lease term is changing. The time is changing. And hence, I need to take my revised discount rate. I need to take the revised rate, correct? To recompute the lease liability. Is that right? But let's say, if this lease term has not been changed, lease term 10 साल का ही है, but the consideration has been changed, right? At the end of year 6, beginning of year 7, lessor told, while in the contract the escalation is 10%, but the market value of the property has increased significantly, and in the market the rentals has also increased significantly. So please increase my rent also. I told my lessor that, Mr. Lessor, as per contract it is 10% every year. He said that please vacate the property, and I agreed. I have agreed to increase 5%, which was not part of my original lease terms and condition. In addition to 10%, I become ready to increase 5%. So my consideration is changing. My time is not changing. My consideration is changing. There is a modification. In this case, when my consideration is changing, again I need to recompute my lease liability. But whether for recomputation of lease liability, should I consider the revised rate or should I consider the original rate?
Original rate, sir.
Original rate, because the time is not changing, because the term is not changing, and hence you need to consider the original rate, right? Have you understood this? Have you understood this? Correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes or no?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Very good. Very good. So friends, now let's solve this question. Illustration number 34 of ICAI study material, right? So let's go step by step. So we need to calculate the impact of modification along with the accounting entries, right? Okay. What is my first step? My first step is calculate present value of future lease payments on the basis of original lease term, right? This is my first step. Okay. My year, etc., etc. So how much years are there? 1, 2. How many years?
10 years.
Original lease term is 10 year. 10 year I need to take. $10. What is my lease payment? 1 lakh rupees. What is my present value factored at 6%? This payment is at the beginning or at the end? This payment is beginning or end? I think it was given in the question. In the question, it was given as
At the
the
end of the
end of the year. End of the year. It is end of the year. So what is the first year discount rate? 1 divided by 1 point, right? This is the discount rate, 1.06. I hope I am doing the right calculation.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You guys need to correct me. You are my teacher. Okay. You all are my teacher. You need to correct me. Okay. This is my present value of lease payment in the beginning at the commencement date. Okay. At the commencement date, this is my present value of lease payment. Okay. Right. On the basis of original lease terms. What is my present value of lease payment? What is my present value of lease payment? The total comes out at 736,009. This is my present value of lease payments. 736,009. What is my initial recognition at the commencement date? What is my initial recognition at the commencement date? क्या entry होगी? Can you tell me the entry quickly?
ROU asset to liability.
ROU asset to lease liability 736,009, 736,009. Okay, so on the commencement date, I have prepared the lease liability ROU schedule. I have computed the ROU and lease liability. I have computed the lease liability, and that will be my ROU. Now, step number 2, let's prepare the lease liability schedule. Prepare schedule of lease liability on the basis of original lease terms and condition. Right? बनाऊं मैं ये? Yes. Prepare lease liability schedule on the basis of original lease terms and condition. Opening balance, interest at the rate of 6%, lease payments, and closing balance. Okay. How many years? 10 years. What is my opening balance? What is my opening balance? 736,009. What is my interest? Multiply by 6%. What is my lease payment? This is my lease payment. What is my closing balance? Is equal to sum of all these three numbers. Okay. ये तो सबको समझ में आ गया ना लीज लाइबिलिटी का शेड्यूल हम कैसे बनाते हैं?
Yes, sir.
Should I explain this again?
No, sir.
Interest I will charge, payment I will make, closing balance, opening plus interest minus payment. Let me drag this to the 10th year. It has to be 0. It has become 0. At the end of the 10th year, it has become 0. Okay. What is the accounting entry? For ROU asset, you need to charge depreciation to accumulated depreciation. For lease liability, you need to charge interest to lease liability to bank. Correct? Okay. So we computed the lease liability and ROU at the commencement date. Now what is the next step? अब क्या करें? पहले दिन तो मैंने कर दिया. Now the second event comes when? Modification.
Correct.
At the time of modification. What I need to do at the time of modification? I need to compute, I need to check my carrying value of assets and liabilities, right? निकालना पड़ेगा ना carrying value. Carrying value at the time of modification. Calculate carrying value of ROU asset and lease liability at the time of modification. That is end of year 6. End of year 6. Can you help me quickly? कि मेरी carrying value कितनी होगी ROU asset की? ROU asset and lease liability. Can you help me quickly? At the beginning of year 7 or end of year 6, what is my values?
346,511.
Sorry.
Minus
Opening balance. What was the opening balance? What was the opening balance at commencement date? At commencement date. कितना था opening balance commencement date पे ROU asset ये था लीज लाइबिलिटी ये थी. ओके, व्हाट इज माय एक्यूमुलेटेड डेप्रिसिएशन? What is my accumulated depreciation? This divide by 10 multiply by
6 years.
6 years. What is my closing balance at the end of year 6? What is my closing balance at the end of year 6? Closing balance. 6th year or beginning of 7th year. Okay. 294,403. What is my closing balance of liability at the end of the 6th year? What is my closing balance of liability? Liability का balance कैसे निकालो?
Calculated in this schedule, sir.
Sir, calculated in this schedule, sir. You have computed year wise in this schedule. End of year 6 closing balance. End of year 6 closing balance. Sir, ये 6 year का end का आपका closing balance. Yes, this is end of year 6. Yes. So my ROU asset is 294 and my lease liability is 346,511. Correct? आपको क्लियर है ना? ये दोनों नंबर कमेंसमेंट डेट पे दोनों नंबर सेम थे, बट 6 ईयर के बाद जो कैरिंग वैल्यू आ रही है दोनों सेम नहीं है. आपको क्लियर है ना क्यों नहीं है सेम? क्यों नहीं है ये सेम?
The charge we are creating on these two things are not equal.
Yes,
Interest
depreciation we are creating on a straight line basis, but interest we are computing on lease liability on a compounding basis. In the higher, so in the initial period interest will be more, in the next period interest will be less. For example, you can see in the first year it was 44,000, 40, 37, 33, 29, 25, 20, right? But depreciation is always equal. Depreciation is always equal, and hence there is a difference in the carrying value of ROU asset and lease liability. Okay, so my carrying value at the end of 6 year of asset and liability is there. Now, what is the next step? What is the next step?
Present value for the lease liability for the coming years we have to calculate at a revised rate of 7%.
At the end of 6 year, you need to recompute revised lease liability on the basis of revised terms at the time of modification. अब आपको निकालना पड़ेगा कि मेरी एग्जिस्टिंग लाइबिलिटी जो 346,511 है, बट व्हाट शुड बी माय रिवाइज्ड लीज लाइबिलिटी? व्हाट शुड बी माय रिवाइज्ड लीज लाइबिलिटी? अगेन सेम ईयर लीज पेमेंट, this same. Present value factor at 6% or 7%? 7%. How many years? How many years? 8 years. 8 years ना? 4 plus 4. मतलब अब आज ही at the end of year 6 you are computing what is my future lease payments. Year 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, right? These are the year, technically these are the years. Technically these are the years, right? Yes. In chronology, but for the discounting this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Discounting के लिए तो ऐसे ही होगा ना, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. ठीक है ना, क्योंकि आप आज रिवाइज लीज लाइबिलिटी निकाल रहे हो. व्हाट इज योर लीज पेमेंट? स्टैंडर्ड क्वेश्चन ने बोला लीज पेमेंट में कोई बदलाव नहीं है, सेम. What is my discount rate at the rate of 7%? What is my discount rate? 1 divided by 1.07 पेमेंट एंड में हो रही है. Divide by 1.07. This is my discount rate. Okay. What is my present value of lease payment? This multiply by this. This is my present value of lease payment. Okay. What is the total? What is the total? Present value. This is my present value of revised lease liability on the date of modification. This is my revised lease liability on the date of modification. Ginny, what is my lease liability? 346 existing. What is my revised lease liability? 597. So what to do now? Vignesh, what to do now?
The adjustment to the ROU and the lease liabilities, sir.
Adjustment to ROU and lease liability, right? So first of all, I need to increase my lease liability. Okay. So I need to credit my lease liability. By what amount I need to credit my lease liability? Step number 5, compare. Step number 5. I have also computed revised lease liability. Now compare revised lease liability with the existing lease liability on the date of modification. What is my revised lease liability? 597. What is my existing lease liability? 346. What is my increase in liability? 250. My revised lease liability is 597. My existing lease liability is 346. What is my increase in lease liability? 597 minus 346. 250619 is my increase in lease liability. क्या करूं अब इस 250 का? Step number 6, adjust ROU asset with change in lease liability. जो भी आपकी lease liability में change है, उसको कहाँ adjust करना है? उसको ROU asset में adjust करना है. उसको ROU asset में. What is my existing ROU asset? What is my existing ROU asset? कितना है मेरा existing ROU asset?
403.
294403. What is my increase in liability? 250619. What is my revised ROU asset? This plus this. 54503. What is accounting entry? What is accounting entry? Right of use asset account debit.
ROU to lease
to lease liability. Lease liability. Credit. Okay. How much? 250619, 250619. This is my revised ROU asset. This is my revised ROU asset. Okay. Finally, what is my revised ROU asset and revised ROU liability at the end of the 6th year? Finally, at the end of 6th year, that is modification date. What is my revised ROU asset? 545. What is my revised lease liability?
597, 130.
597. Okay. So these are the values. Now this ROU asset has to be depreciated over the next 8 years. Okay. And what happens with the revised lease liability? This 597, 130. This interest has to be charged, lease payment has to be made, right? And it will become 0. ये 0 होगा या नहीं होगा? Lease liability का schedule बनाकर दिखाऊं दोबारा? Should I show you the lease liability schedule? Will it be 0 or will it not be 0?
It has to be 0.
It has
to be 0.
It has to be 0. Shall I show you the lease liability schedule? Or is it okay?
Okay, sir.
Okay, very good. So friends, whenever there is a lease modification, whenever the scope is increasing, and if that increase in scope is in line with the increase in the rentals as per the market value, as per the fair value, that modification is a separate contract, right? But what happens when the scope is not increasing? Lease term is increasing, right? In that case, so first of all, the separate contract will be there only when there is an increase in scope and the rentals are in line with that increase in the scope, right? Otherwise, in all other cases, it will be largely, amendment in the existing contract. For example, your lease term is increasing or decreasing. Lease term is increasing, let's say. In that case, you have to remeasure your lease liability on the basis of revised discount rate. Whatever is the difference between the lease liability, right? You have to adjust with the ROU asset, right? that increase or decrease has to be adjusted with the ROU asset, right? This is what it is, the modification accounting. Correct? Any question, friends? Any question? Do you have any question? Tell me if you have any question. Any question, friends? So today, what we have covered? Today we have covered subsequent measurement of right of use asset and lease liability, right? We have done some questions and we have also covered the concept of lease modification, right? So that is what we have discussed it today. Friends, in the next two classes, in the next class, I will also take some time, 15-20 minutes on this lease modification. Then I will cover the lease and non-lease component, separation of the lease and non-lease component in a lease contract. Okay. Then I will be going to cover the lessor accounting, which is very simple. So I'm going to cover the lessor accounting. And then I will be covering sublease concept and sale and leaseback transaction. So in the next two classes, we will be covering these 3-4 concepts, right? Largely the lessor accounting, sublease and sale and leaseback transaction. These are the 3 big concepts which I'm going to cover in the next 2 classes. In addition to discussing more on this lease modification, and we'll be discussing on lease and non-lease component, separation of lease and non-lease component as well. Okay. Thank you so much, friends. Bye-bye. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Session is over. Yes.